Greg, it's great to see you once again. A roll tide, a good start for the Crimson Tide this past weekend.
Roll Tide, 1-0, right? I mean, everybody, week one is just such a just hold your nose, survive, be healthy. It's so funny because you're watching, you're like, oh, I want to see him get better here. I want to see him get better there. I want to. Ultimately, why are we nitpicking? Win is a win, baby. Now you focus your attention forward. And there were several examples of teams that were looking ahead this past weekend, weren't there? Goodness. Looking at just some of the matchups, a couple of the spots. I mean, it was Baylor has Utah coming in. They lose to Texas State. You look at Texas Tech has Oregon coming in. They lose to Wyoming. I mean, there were a handful of teams that were clearly looking ahead and impacted their play. Some won, but they didn't look great in the process of winning. So I've always been really proud of how Coach Saban handles that. You know, I think he does an amazing job of focusing on the now. And I can remember a pretty vivid moment, at least my junior year, the year we won it, actually. We're playing against UT Martin in week 11 or whatever it was. And I remember thinking to myself, like, man, if we don't play well, you know, they could get us. You know, like, Coach just had this way of like doing Jedi mind tricks on us to make us think that, hey, we better play well or else this team can definitely get us. And you're always focused on your own personal performance and reaching your standard internally. So I thought it was a really good performance. I thought they did a lot of really nice things. There were a couple people that really stood out to me, and I came away with it as a fan, very excited about what's coming.
Well, you mentioned in our conversation last week, you had heard some confidence about Jalen Milroe and his progression and really the quarterback situation as a whole for Alabama. And it seemed like it played out that way on Saturday with how well Milroe performed.
Well, I think part of it, though, you just have to play. You know what I mean? It's easy. In practice is kind of monotonous and it's difficult. And the defense knows your plays and they know your signals. They know your checks. So then you kind of practice. It's kind of hard to develop confidence. I mean, it's much more difficult to develop confidence in practice than it is the game. It just is. And I wish that, I mean, you don't ever want to make practice easier, but quarterback is just such a confidence-driven position. You just have to play, and you got to play well, and you got to kind of. I mean, you even go back and you listen to some folks and what they said about Bryce Young, his first fall on campus. And granted, it was COVID tricky situation, all that other stuff. It's like he kind of struggled early in camp. There were rumors in 2020 about Mac Jones, you know, maybe not playing great in camp. It's camp. You know what I mean? Like it's just so hard to face the team that knows you like the back of their hand every single day. If I make an adjustment, if I make a mic point, if I do this, I do that, they know everything we're doing. So to the point, remember like Rolando, I would check a play because they were in a look. I'd check a play. Rolando would say, all right, run to the right. I'm like, oh gosh. All right. And hey, wipe it. All right, screen to the left. It's like, oh, you know, like it's like it is terrible. They know our offense in some cases better than we do. So I think it was really good for Jalen to play and to have an offense and a game plan that was tailored to his skill set, and have an offense and a game plan that was tailored to taking advantage of the opposing team's liabilities. And I thought he played really well. I mean, watching it back, I mean, was it a flawless performance? No, but I also think, you know, there were a couple times where the snaps were a little inaccurate and he made something out of nothing, which I think is maybe his best attribute as of right now. I mean, the guy's just a dynamo with the ball in his hands. But what I was really encouraged by were some of the throws early. You know, he made a throw on third down to Bond to the left. It might have been the first third down of the game. I don't recall exactly what it was. It was a little inside, not bad at all, but a good, accurate throw to his left. And we hadn't seen him really on an out route to his left. That's a tough throw for a quarterback, and to do it early in a ball game is tricky, because as a quarterback, you think you're releasing it this way. Well, just anyone that can visualize holding the football, as you release it right with your right hand, you turn your wrist this way. So it means that the ball is rotating this way clockwise. Well, when the ball's rotating clockwise, it's going to tail to the right. And if a receiver's breaking out to the left, that ball is really easy to leave inside. Well, the first throw he made to the left was just the tiniest bit inside, still a completion, still a conversion, good throw. But you actually saw him make the exact same throw later in the ball game, and it was perfect to the outside. You actually could see his confidence growing as he was getting comfortable in the plan. And then he makes the great throw to Bond on the touchdown downfield on the big post. That was a thing of beauty. He's a great deep ball thrower, so that one didn't come as much of a surprise. But the intermediate throws was where I really wanted to see him, you know, make some progress. I thought the throw to Niblack for the touchdown to the left was a great example of that progress. Put it high. You got a big, tall, wide receiver. That's big time accuracy. That's next level accuracy. High, let him go up and make it. If he misses it, it's out of the back of the end zone, or it's an incompletion. Us or no one is what quarterbacks say. So not only was he decisive, but he was also very accurate. And it was next level accuracy that I thought was really on display as the game went along. Buckner, I think, did some nice things. It's nice to see him turn the corner for the touchdown too. You see he's got some juice as well. We've talked about that a little bit. And then I think Ty was in a little bit of a difficult spot. Didn't get a ton of opportunity naturally, but being able to lead a touchdown drive is neat regardless of who it's against. So I was really impressed with all three quarterbacks. I thought Jalen played fantastic, and hopefully he can carry over some of that momentum into this week.
Certainly excited for the Allstate Crossbar Challenge between Alabama and Texas. And once again, it's Coach Saban going up against one of his former assistant coaches in Steve Sarkisian. Those two, of course, met last year for the first time, a very close game in Austin. What makes it tricky for Alabama to go up against Steve Sarkisian with his familiarity with this program, and he continues to recruit at a high level at Texas?
Well, it's not just Coach Sark, right? He's the headliner, Roger. He's the headliner. Coach Sark is a phenomenal coach. I think he's great. I don't need to convince Alabama fans of that. We all know, and we saw it for years, right? And the job he did with Mac, and the job he did with Tua and everybody, he's just a great coach. He's a really, really, really good XO game plan specific, matchup specific offensive mind. But he's not the only one with great familiarity. Bo Davis is there. He's the defensive line coach. He, of course, was with us for, gosh, as long as I can remember. I love Bo Davis. Every time I see him, he gives me a big bear hug, and I think he's going to literally break my back. He's so strong. Love Coach Davis. Jeff Banks is there. Jeff Banks, special teams coach, was obviously with us for a long time. Kyle Flood is there. I mean, there's people even off the field that have familiarity with what we do in Tuscaloosa. So I think it's difficult because they have tried to create their own Alabama, right? Naturally, Coach Sark's 3 years in, Coach Saban's 17 or however many it is. I lose track. So it's a little bit different, but there is, I think, a certain continuity. And as far as playing against a team that you really understand now, Sark's just far enough away removed where he maybe doesn't know the personnel as well as he did last year, because he coached Bryce Young. He'd been around Bryce Young. It was in a backup role. He knew his skill set. He recruited him. He knew everything there was to know about him. Now, how much does he know about Jalen? Quite a bit too. I mean, I'm not going to say he doesn't, but does he know as much about some of the guys and what their strengths and weaknesses are that are now in the rotation? I think that's a real question mark. But when you have a guy that has coached against, for instance, when you're only 2 years removed from being the OC at a place, he knew every single dude on the roster last year. He knew what they could do. He knew what they couldn't do. He knew what they excelled at, and he knew what they might struggle with. And he knew how to neutralize them because he's a great offensive mind. For instance, Will Anderson, one of my favorite Alabama players of all time, maybe his worst performance ever, as an Alabama player. And it's not, heck, he's human. Imagine that. Barely, but he is human. So I think he just knew how to attack certain individuals. And I think that is what this game will ultimately come down to. Who wins one-on-one matchups? And that's not just wide receivers against DBs. That's, right tackle against defensive end. That's running back against blitzing linebacker. That's safety covering tight end. There's this matchup, because of how Sark likes to set it up, will be almost exclusively about individual matchups, and whoever wins the most will win the game. It's as simple as that.
Well, we certainly love hearing your thoughts on this matchup, what's coming up Saturday between Alabama and Texas, but we also want to go back just a bit to when you played for Alabama against the Texas Longhorns. I believe your helmet from that game is right behind you
right there
on the BCS championship game.
You can see the BCS sticker prominently displayed. And then on the other side, right next to the Longhorn helmet, I have the national championship game ball that is right above the Jets touchdown ball. Emphasis on touchdown, not touchdowns, just one. But I have one. It's right there. and the national championship trophy is right next to the Longhorn helmet, because any Longhorn fan needs to be reminded that that is what they missed out on. So I figured that's just my wall of spite right there, that little corner of Bama Texas game ball, Texas helmet, and then national championship trophy, ironically, right next to the Texas helmet.
That's outstanding. Yeah, just another good reminder of what turned out to be a great night in Alabama football history. If you could, just take us back to the preparation that your team had for that night in January at the Rose Bowl and what ultimately led to a great Crimson Tide win for that first national championship in the Saban era.
Roger, how much time you got, buddy? I got a lot of stories on this one.
Unlimited.
All right. So we have to go back to the SEC championship game to appropriately discuss the Texas game. Our whole offseason was about Florida, about getting over the hump, about beating Florida, about finding a way to get it done and to ultimately, overtake. And once we achieved that, there was a real cognizant effort from Coach Saban to remind us that that was not the finish line. Hey, we still have one more, guys. Like, don't, have a parade just yet. We still have one more. Yes, we beat the team that we had set out to beat 12 months ago, but you guys will just, wither away to nothing if we lose this championship game. That was basically it. So a big theme of bowl practice was actually Miracle and the movie Miracle. And because I didn't know this until I saw the movie, that when the U.S. beat the Soviets, it was in the semifinal game. And that Herb Brooks, of course, the head coach of the Miracle hockey team, he had said something along the lines of, you guys will never bleep and forgive yourselves if you lose this game, when they're sitting there up 1 against Sweden or whoever it was in the championship, so for the gold medal. So that was the theme, is that the work is not done. We got to continue. Yes, it's cool that we set out to beat these guys. We got it done. Now there's more work to do. When we were preparing for Texas, I had broken ribs. I had broken them on the last play of the third quarter of the SEC championship game. I was still able to practice, but not without pain. It was a very difficult 5-week stretch for me. It was awful. If anyone that's broken ribs, I'm going to pray for you, because it's just something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. I was just in a lot of pain. We couldn't quite diagnose it. They didn't see cracks initially. And then we got the CAT or an MRI, and you could see them pretty obviously. So a lot of my Christmas was spent rehabbing that and practicing to the best of my ability. We were a little limited on what we could do. I couldn't really drive the ball really far, but I was pretty good on the underneath and didn't have a lot of issues with that. But we really knew.
Question with that: could you have played in a playoff game had it been set up like it has been the last few years?
They would have to literally amputate my right arm not to allow me to play in a playoff game. So, and then in which case I would try to throw left-handed. I just don't know how effective. And at that point, I don't know if I would have been, if they did remove my right arm, I don't know if I would have been the best man for the job. I would play. Well, I don't care. I didn't tell my mom about the ribs. I thought she'd be a nervous wreck. My dad knew, and a small contingent around the facility knew, but not everybody. Very few people. It was something we really tried to keep quiet. So, moving into the practices, we watched the tape of Texas. I watched all 12 games, 13 games actually, because they had just played Nebraska in the Big 12 championship. And we noticed pretty quickly that the strength of their unit was really in the back end. They were an excellent secondary. So I was like, phew, thank goodness. Probably not going to have to throw it a lot tonight. That's their strength. Let's not let Earl Thomas take over the game, because he was their deep free safety. He was an amazing player. Aaron Williams was one of their corners. He was excellent as well. Their other corner was really good. And then Blake Gideon was more of a box safety, but was a really solid piece. And then their pass rush was also excellent. They were really good on the edges. Had a couple of defensive tackles that played in the show, but Sergio Kindle was their alpha dog. And we had to really make sure that we limited his contributions. But still to this day, I've told people this, he's one of the best defenders I've ever played against. I mean, Sergio Kindle was just amazing. Really a great edge player. So we knew that our path to victory was going to have to be on the ground. We were going to have to control the line of scrimmage. We're going to take care of the football. It was our recipe all year long, so it wasn't anything that we were surprised by. Then we get to game day. And we had a couple interesting formations for him that we thought we could get him in, but our traditional standard sets, we didn't think we had a great matchup on the perimeter, even though Julio was great. Julio had been a little bit dinged up at times throughout the season, and he was going to be kind of more of a decoy than anything else. Hey, if you can just keep Gideon over the top of you or Earl Thomas over the top of you, that's going to be great, because that's going to allow us to freely run. So Julio in the game was really more of a decoy in the plan. We did have a couple things in trying to get Marquise Mays deep. Did have a couple things for Darius Hanks, but not a ton. The featured players in the game were going to be Mark Ingram and Trent Richardson, and they were. The offensive line was amazing in the game, as you know. And then it all really changed when Colt McCoy got hurt. They decided to run speed option into Marcel Darius, which I would never do. Colt unfortunately led with his right shoulder, and then, of course, had an issue that forced him to the sideline the rest of the way. When Colt got hurt, I remember getting on the headset talking to Mac, and he basically saying, how are you on your run checks? Like, are we good with our run checks? All of our run fakes, all of our, hey, this run to that run, this run to this run. Here's what if we want to run this, if we get this particular look. So we went through all the checks again on the sideline after Colt got hurt, because we knew that we were going to shift to an ultra conservative game plan. We did that. We're up 24-3 at halftime. Everyone's kind of breathed a sigh of relief. We're sitting there. We're like, man, this is good. 30 more minutes. Like, come on, guys, let's go. But it was only natural for us to kind of at that point play a little bit defensive and say, man, we really don't want to lose this one, as opposed to continuing to attack and going out and getting after it and setting the tone and making it happen. So they get a couple big plays. They really win the third quarter, and we didn't have a great third quarter. And then really that first part of the fourth quarter, it wasn't so fun either. We finally had to put a little bit of a drive together, switch field position, reclaim a little momentum. We pin them deep, and then boom, third down. A couple plays later, Eric Anders strip sack. We get it. I hand it to Ingram, and it's icing on the cake. It's over. And there's a moment, you can probably look it up. I hand it off, and I think it was the last touchdown, where I hand it off. I know he's going in. It's a walk-in. And I just put my hands on the side of my head like this, like, I can't believe I'm a national championship winning quarterback. Like, that was what I was saying. I can't believe we did it. Like, this is such a dream come true. This is what we came here for. It gives me chill bumps. I'm actually getting them now, still thinking about it, because that was just such a great moment of success at what we've been working for 4 years, and being able to deliver it for the people that have followed us from the very beginning through the early 2000s that were awful, to the mid 2000s when we were average as the day is long, to finally getting back to the college football mountaintop was just the most satisfying thing I've ever experienced. And to know that too, and I think I've actually grown and appreciated it more. We were so insulated at the moment, right? You're doing it for each other in the locker room. Of course, you're doing it for the school. You're doing it for the state. You're so proud. But as I've now lived in the state for the last 6 years, and as I've been around people, to know what that game meant to people, it only gets sweeter with time. And it's just to be a small piece of it is one of the most gratifying and humbling things I've ever experienced in my life. And I'll forever be indebted to Alabama because of it. But I'm really glad that in the 5 years I was there, we were able to deliver one. It's just all you could ever really want as a player.
Certainly was a great night in Pasadena. We know we're going to have fun coming up this Saturday in Tuscaloosa for the Allstate Crossbar Challenge, Alabama against Texas. Greg, we've had a blast here on Crimson Drive the last 2 weeks, getting to chat with you and get your thoughts on this matchup. As we mentioned in the last episode, so many notable connections you have, not only with Alabama, of course, but also from growing up in Texas. So it was a lot of fun to pick your brain, and best of luck in your travels around college football. Thank you again.
Roger, I appreciate it, man. I'm so excited for this one. And I just hope they play a lot of highlights from 09. At least in the pregame. Let's just play a couple highlights from 09 in the pregame. Can we make that happen?
I think so. Well, I saw the tradition video, and they still have you hopping down the sideline against Florida. So that one's still, in there.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. But let's maybe take the Florida games out. We need to focus on Texas, right? Because Florida was done, but we'll never forgive ourselves if we don't take care of business in the next game, right? So, it's really going to be a special one. I hope everybody that watches enjoys it. And know too, the best part about it is that we're going to get it again in 25 and 24, and we're going to get it again indefinitely with the new look SEC starting next year.